This is CBN NewsWatch.
It is Tuesday, July 28th. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, some good news in the battle against the coronavirus as the disease seems to be slowing down in major states, and now a major step forward in a test for a possible vaccine. Plus, we're going to talk with CBN News medical reporter Lori Johnson about whether hydroxychloroquine is also an effective treatment. Israeli troops on high alert today after heavy fighting on their northern border Monday. We're going to see what happened and explore what could be ahead. He was a member of the Ku Klux Klan, full of hate, but then a radical change, and now he's leading a very different life. Plus, revival on the beaches of California. We're going to hear from one of the organizers as the kingdom of God is being proclaimed. All those stories and more are ahead in this edition of CBN NewsWatch. We want to begin this half hour with the positive news on the fight against the coronavirus, as it looks like the spread of the disease is slowing down in Texas, Florida, and Arizona. And that's coming as volunteers are rolling up their sleeves to take part in the biggest test yet of an experimental vaccine. Dale Hurd is on the story.
In the race for a vaccine, Moderna is about to begin its third and final phase of testing. Pfizer is close behind. And there's hope that by the end of this year, there will be 2 or 3 coronavirus vaccines ready for use.
This is enormous. We've been sitting on the sidelines passively, attempting to wear our masks and social distance and not go out when it's not necessary. This is the first step of becoming active against this.
30,000 Americans are expected to participate in both the Moderna and Pfizer trials.
Certainly, we will be doing the tests in areas where there is a significant viral challenge so that the test can actually very quickly see whether we're giving the protection.
That makes me cautiously optimistic that we may have something here, but it's going to take a few months to determine whether or not we do.
It will be months before results come in, and there is no guarantee the vaccines will ultimately work against the scourge that has killed over 650,000 people around the world, including almost 150,000 Americans. And President Trump says therapeutic treatments like blood transfusions could come even sooner.
Therapeutics meaning you go and you give somebody, whether it's transfusion or shots or whatever it may be, and they heal, and they heal quickly.
Across the country, citizens and business owners continue to be arrested for defying state-ordered lockdowns and mask laws, like this gym owner in Florida. Just 72 hours after the shortened baseball season started, a pair of games scheduled for Monday night were postponed after more than a dozen members of the Miami Marlins baseball team and staff tested positive. Meanwhile, Congress is debating the next round of economic stimulus. Republicans released their plan Monday night as millions of Americans are set to lose a key unemployment benefit. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
A professor of epidemiology at Yale University says we already have a treatment for the coronavirus. Writing in Newsweek, Professor Harvey Reich says the key to defeating COVID-19 already exists. We need to start using it. He's talking about hydroxychloroquine. He says he is amazed he has to fight for using it. The idea the data fully supports it and that tens of thousands of patients are dying unnecessarily. He writes it's highly effective when it's given early on during the disease. But politics and some poor research studies have led to it being disregarded. You can read his evidence for why he says this inexpensive drug works at cbnnews.com. And our medical reporter Lori Johnson joins us now to talk more about the potential treatments and more about the coronavirus. So this professor at Yale is talking about hydroxychloroquine. Does it work if given early on?
Well, you know, Ephraim, it's very important these days to remember that when someone gives their opinion, it's just that. This person is a professor of epidemiology, and so he has some credibility. He is not a medical doctor. And we're seeing a lot of things on the internet, particularly about cures, silver bullets, conspiracy theories about vaccines. And we just need to be very discerning and really pray for discernment about what is true and what is not true. So regarding hydroxychloroquine, this is something that we've been talking about since the very beginning. And there have been some studies done on this, and the results have been mixed. So we saw one that did show that it reduced death at the Henry Ford Medical Center in Detroit, which was very reliable. But then we've seen other studies showing that it posed no benefit, and then even other studies that shows it was harmful. I personally know someone who was given hydroxychloroquine and died not long after receiving that. We do know that hydroxychloroquine can be very damaging for people who have heart issues. That's not disputed. So the hydroxychloroquine question is still up in the air. Doctors can prescribe it if they want to prescribe it off-label. The FDA has not approved this for COVID-19, but I received a call recently from a viewer saying, I want to take hydroxychloroquine, my doctor won't prescribe it, and I told her, you're just going to need to find another doctor who will prescribe it. Some will, some won't. Now, regarding settled science, there are 3 treatments that have been proven beyond the shadow of a doubt to work. One of them is remdesivir. That's an antiviral, and that is something that people should take as soon as possible because it stops the virus from multiplying. Then dexamethasone, which is a steroid, and that has been shown to reduce death, and that's been given by injection and also in pill form. And then convalescent plasma, which the president was talking about, which is actual blood from people who survived, and it's full of those wonderful antibodies. There are so many things that are being tested right now. We're going to have more treatments very soon.
Speaking of having more treatments, what do we know about the vaccines being tested right now?
Well, there are a lot of them, and that's the good news. The one that's going forward right now, the Moderna, which is already starting, what you do is you take 30,000 volunteers, half of them get the vaccine, half of them get a placebo, so they themselves don't even know. And this is going on in like 80 different areas of the country, and we just watch them closely to see if, number one, they get COVID-19 and are able to fight it off, and number two, if they have any adverse reactions like side effects. And so far, the side effects have been very minimal. And so not only Moderna, but we're talking about other vaccines that are going to be tested very soon. 150,000 people have signed up. Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, the list goes on and on. These are called phase 3 trials, and if a vaccine makes it through phase 3 trials, then it's ready to be given to the general public. Although, Ephraim, it's interesting, only about 25 to 30% of vaccines actually do make it through phase 3 trials. So it's a good thing that there are a lot of them that are being tested.
Yeah, real quick. This is often called the novel coronavirus. Is that because it's something new?
It is. And, you know, when it first came out, everyone was like, okay, it's a coronavirus. We know that. What can we compare it to so that we can understand it better? Is it like SARS? Is it like MERS? Is it like the coronaviruses that we see associated with the common cold? And sadly, what we've learned is it's like them in some ways, but it's really not like them in so many other ways. It's different. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. And probably the most concerning thing about it, and that makes it so different, is that so many people who have it and are contagious are asymptomatic. 40% and estimated. And that's the real problem with this one.
Indeed. Laurie Johnson, thank you so much for your insight. Much appreciated. Another major news story today is Attorney General William Barr will appear before the House Judiciary Committee. He's expected to heavily criticize what he calls the bogus Russiagate scandal, and that he believes many Democrats are trying to discredit him, saying they think he's simply doing the president's bidding, which he says is not true. Barr will also defend the federal law enforcement response to the violence in some major cities, saying violent rioters and anarchists have hijacked legitimate protests, quote unquote, sparked by the death of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police. Coming up, Israeli tanks are patrolling the Golan Heights today, and its troops are on high alert after heavy fighting Monday along the country's northern border. We're going to tell you what happened and see what could be coming next when we come back.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel. Now available at cbnradio.com.
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres-Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
Prophecy thousands of years old.
We were called to be a light to the world.
Being fulfilled today. Discover how. Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life. Just call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he has, which color he is. This is what I'm doing.
See how the people of Israel are fulfilling prophecy.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
By sharing their knowledge.
In Africa, in Asia, in South America, in East Europe.
And their love.
This is how we work. This is us.
Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
Welcome back. Israeli troops remain on high alert along its northern border after heavy fighting erupted there Monday. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell brings us the story now from Jerusalem.
Israeli tanks patrolled the Golan Heights today near the site of fighting as a tense calm returned to Israel's northern border. Heavy exchanges of fire erupted between Israel and Hezbollah along the Lebanese border on Monday. Plumes of smoke could be seen rising above Lebanon in what some describe as one of the worst exchanges of fire since the 2006 Second Lebanon War. The Israel Defense Forces ordered Israelis to stay inside near the border areas. Israel said the clashes began after a Hezbollah cell infiltrated across the northern border. Following the incident, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel was monitoring the situation and its policy was clear.
First, we will not allow Iran to entrench militarily on our border with Syria. Second, Lebanon and Hezbollah will bear the responsibility for any attack against us emanating from the Lebanese territory. Third, the IDF is prepared for any scenario. We're active in all areas for the security of Israel, both close to our borders and far from them.
Earlier, alternate Prime Minister and Defense Minister Benny Gantz said Israel would prevent Iran from sending advanced weapons and precision missile capabilities to Syria and Lebanon.
I remind both Lebanon and Syria that they're responsible for what is happening in their territory, and the State of Israel will demand this responsibility from Syria and Lebanon. We're not looking to make unnecessary escalations, but whoever tests us will meet a very high operative capacity that I hope we will not have to put to use.
Israel had been braced for an attack since a Hezbollah operative was killed last week in an alleged Israeli airstrike on Iranian targets inside Syria. Last Friday, U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, made an unannounced visit to Israel to discuss security challenges in the region. His visit came at a time of heightened tensions with Iran and its allies across the Middle East, after a series of unexplained explosions have rocked the Islamic Republic.
And Chris Mitchell joins us now. So, Chris, why would the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff show up in Israel unannounced?
Well, it's a great question, Ephraim. It was actually a rare trip regardless, even more so during a pandemic when the U.S. Joint Chief of Staff would actually pay a visit here. I think you have to see it in the larger context of what's happening right now in the region. You have these mysterious explosions inside Iran. And so he met with not only the Chief of Staff of the IDF, Benny Gantz, he's the current Minister of Defense, also had a virtual call with Bibi Netanyahu, but also importantly, he met with the head of the Mossad, Yossi Cohen, and that could be related to what's happening inside Iran. We believe that Mossad certainly has some sort of operations going in there. Also, perhaps this is a window of opportunity, both for the U.S. and the Israel, to continue that pressure on Iran right now. We think that's just unrelenting right now. Iran is weak because of COVID-19, the economic sanctions. It's a very, very difficult time for Iran right now, and it seems like there's a wider plan of the U.S. and Israel to put pressure on the Islamic Republic.
Now, the fighting yesterday was on Israel's border with Lebanon. Tell us about the situation inside Lebanon and what impact it could have on Israel.
Well, Ephraim, I think this is a very underreported story of what's happening here in the Middle East. First of all, Lebanon is a beautiful country. I just talked to a Lebanese friend just a few minutes ago. It's a wonderful country, but right now, economically, politically, it's really a mess. Even before COVID-19 hit, they had massive demonstrations in the street because of the economic situation right now. Lebanon has probably the highest debt ratio in the world. Its currency has been devastated. In fact, another friend that lives in Beirut right now sent me a video not too long ago about actually giving out food on the streets. This is really unprecedented of what's happening inside Lebanon. So I think the weakness of Lebanon really could lead to instability in that country. And also there's weakness by Hezbollah as well. Hezbollah has been weakened because of its involvement in the Syrian civil war. And there is some protests against Hezbollah inside Lebanon against Hezbollah, which is really unprecedented. And they're blaming Hezbollah for some of the economic woes. Whether or not this is going to lead to some sort of incident on the border because of the weakness, would Hezbollah strike at Israel? Could Israel think that this is a good time to strike against Lebanon? It remains to be seen, because it presents a huge threat to Israel because it has 150,000 rockets there in South Lebanon.
Chris, how will this play out politically in Israel, especially in the relationship between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz in their unity government?
Great question, Ephraim, because right now I think there's internal tension between Gantz and Netanyahu. They are kind of rivals politically, so there's an internal tension within this coalition. However, if there's an external threat to Israel because of Hezbollah on the northern border, because of Iran, because of the Iranian buildup within Syria, I think this is when Israelis rally by themselves. The whole political spectrum will come together, and that could actually strengthen the coalition for such a time as this. Right now, there are protests going on about COVID-19, the economic impact here in Israel, and so there has actually been talks about a possible fourth election right now. So we'll see what happens there. But right now, the external threats against Israel may actually help the coalition government between Benny Gantz and Benjamin Netanyahu.
All right, CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
Still ahead, he was a member of the Ku Klux Klan, full of hatred, so much so he planted a bomb at the home of a civil rights leader in the 1960s. Now, after a long prison sentence, his life was changed. We're going to show you how right after this.
Too often, we carry baggage from our past. You know what it's like. It affects everything and everyone in our lives. It's always there, weighing us down and keeping us from achieving true happiness. But do you know God never meant for us to be trapped in the past? You can be free of your baggage. Learn how God's forgiveness leads to changed lives and new beginnings. Call the 700 Club.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5, Wednesday night at 9:30.
Tikkun Olam.
This is our nature as a country.
To make the world a better place.
Literally, we felt the earth shaking.
The Christian Broadcasting Network presents To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
This film needs to be seen by everyone. I was in tears.
Now you can own the inspiring documentary To Life on DVD.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
I'm so grateful that this film was made.
To Life can be yours for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com.
We know that every minute counts to save life.
It'll bless Israel, but it'll also bless all the friends of Israel.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are making the world a better place. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com to get your copy today.
Tom Terrence hated blacks, Jews, and liberals, so much so he planted a bomb at the home of a civil rights leader back in 1968. And for that, a judge sentenced him to 30 years in prison. Now, this former Ku Klux Klan member is free, and you won't believe what he is doing. John Jessup has the extraordinary story.
I heard lots of sermons. I went to Sunday school regularly. I even made a profession of faith when I was 13 years old.
Listening to Tom Terrence, it's hard to imagine the soft-spoken preacher once served time in prison and survived 4 gunshot wounds in an FBI shootout before landing a 30-year sentence for planting a bomb at the home of a civil rights leader in 1968.
I hated black people, I hated Jews, I hated liberals, and on and on.
That hatred eventually drew him to the Ku Klux Klan.
My school had been selected for desegregation, and I became very angry about it.
In prison, Tom began a search for truth and deeper meaning that ultimately led him to the Bible. He became a Christian and acknowledged his sordid past.
I certainly deserved to die. I had deserved to go to hell for my sins. But in His great mercy, God spared my life.
Tom's faith grew with the help of prominent Christians like Billy Graham and Chuck Colson, founder of Prison Fellowship. He abandoned his racist ideology, and after an unexpected early prison release, Tom saw an amazing turnaround, eventually co-pastoring a multi-ethnic church in Washington, D.C., and leading a global ministry devoted to making Christian disciples.
It's not impossible for people who hold some basic Christian beliefs to embrace this kind of extremist narrative that I did.
Now, some 50 years later, Tom sees another cultural collision facing America. He reveals similarities between then and now in his new book, Consumed by Hate, Redeemed by Love.
I saw all of this as a kind of war, fighting for God and country.
A viewpoint still evident today.
Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us!
He points to the deadly April 2019 shooting at a California synagogue as an example of white nationalism growing on the internet and how it's worked its way onto college campuses and even inside some churches.
A young man raised in a Presbyterian church, Orthodox Presbyterian church, I should say, fell into this type of thinking and put them together, and then went and shot up a synagogue.
He calls on churches to confront this evil and believes the key to change is at the core of true Christian values.
Just teach the Bible. Teach what Jesus taught about loving God with all your heart, and soul and mind and strength, and loving your neighbor. All the different races and ethnicities and political perspectives. We're called to love one another.
A message and a calling he says is more urgent now than ever. John Jessup, CBN News, Washington.
We have more for you on the revival in California, as we will hear from one of the organizers who had the vision for this move of God. We're going to see how it's touching people from every background. That story when we come back.
It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
From Washington, D.C., uncompromising stories, interviews, and analysis from veteran journalists David Brody.
Escalating fight.
Jenna Browder.
Chose his words carefully.
Ben Kennedy.
Plan to join him.
And Amber Strong.
For impeachment grows a little bit louder.
Bringing you the political news that matters.
We get out and tell the story of the progress that we're making in this country.
Watch Faith Nation, weeknights at 6 on the CBN News Channel.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
As the nations rage, you can stand with Israel.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
Call 1-800-700-7000 and get to life.
This is our nature as a country.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he has, which color he is, this is what I'm doing.
Support Israel in their time of need. Get to Life, now available on DVD. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
And I wish that other people throughout the world could see this side of Israel.
The revival continues on the shores of Huntington Beach, California. Hundreds of people still gathering to worship, pray, and receive salvation. Saturate Orange County began July 3rd in an effort to share the gospel and spread the good news about the kingdom of God. The idea for the Seaside Evangelical Movement started in 2016 when its organizers, Parker and Jesse Green, had a vision of thousands of people being baptized along the beach's pier.
It really feels like you're on heaven on earth, and people are just being set free, and there's so much joy and so much peace, and people are being set free from depression and suicidal thoughts. And it feels like what God would always want the earth to look like. God's doing something really unique here where every single race has been there being baptized. And then also every generation. I mean, we've baptized 5-year-old kids and 75-year-old men. I just baptized on Friday an 8-year-old named Matthew who was crying because of how much he loved Jesus. And then he baptized his 16-year-old sister.
Jesse tells the Prayer Link the group does work to adhere to social distancing guidelines, providing masks and hand sanitizer to all those who register for the event. You can hear the rest of the interview on the Prayer Link. That's tonight on the CBN News Channel. It begins at 6:30 Eastern Time. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable. It's a message I pray will bless you, and you will post, tag, tweet, and share with others. Remember, it's easy to get down, depressed, or dejected in times like these. Resist. Now is the time to rise up and rest in the promises of God. You have a hope and a future in Him. With that word, I encourage you to make this a terrific Tuesday. It can be and it should be, despite all the headlines that could make you forget God's greatness. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. We thank you so much for watching. I want to remind you, you can find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel at any time. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. Goodbye, everybody. God bless. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow.